Today's portfolio comes from Joe. I would love a web portfolio review from the perspective of a busy hiring manager, but some of my projects are under NDA. I have 3 years of experience working in startups and was recently laid off, now aiming for a mid-level product design job in SaaS and tech desktop apps. They are in New York City. Another day and another portfolio to review, and this time it's from one of the community members from Discord. If you don't know about Design Squad, then what are you doing? Join it today. But their portfolio is pretty nice. I know it's under NDA, so maybe I can give a bit of advice with the NDA too. Joe, make sure to watch my other videos which cover that. There's literally, I think, 2 or 3 videos just dedicated to NDA and how to present it. And I even show an example from one of the people who had a gig at Facebook, and they did it right. They basically abstracted the message enough and described in a lot of vague generalist terms of the value they delivered, but that was enough to say, okay, we actually been in Facebook and we did this work. So you can get inspiration from that. Just search something on my channel and you should find it. I think it's one of the latest ones. But I can see that, let's say you worked with anthropology, and this is my cup of tea, by the way, but I would steer away from using available upon request note as you have it on your portfolio. I would literally say this is under NDA. Make it explicit. Put a padlock icon or something like that so people know that you respect the NDA. However, you can add some abstracted notes to this. You do need to understand what's under IP and what isn't, but you can talk about the things you did in terms of UX. You don't have to go and list out the findings or specific like insights or signals or things of that nature, because that IP belongs to the actual company, obviously. But you can talk roughly exactly what the journey was like. You can outline maybe a problem even, because trust me, Anthropology or any other brand have the same problems as any other brand. You can talk it on a very general terms like competition, commercial value, growth, things of that nature. What was the actual objective at least? Because objective has no IP to it. Objective is probably listed already in a job spec before you even got hired. So you can use that information, just make sure to abstract it enough, roughly descriptive of what the actual work was. I presume the case study Joe submitted was self-directed, or a project which they wanted to kind of add to the portfolio itself as an additional thing, because most of it is under NDA. The summary of it is that it's tools to facilitate long discussion, share agenda, and take notes, virtual meetings designed based on Zoom. The role, the time frame. Immediately where I would challenge you on that note is to not just frame it about the tool, but frame it around experience. You're talking about Zoom environment, you're talking about virtual meetings, you're talking about facilitation of discussions and agenda sharing. That probably could be framed around the actual user benefit or the experience they're gonna have. And you could be quite explicit too. You could say, don't take it verbatim, but it could be something like reducing time wastage in Zoom meetings with smarter agendas or something along those lines. You could frame it that way. Sell it a little bit, I think, but also sell it from the user benefit or customer experience perspective. You show what exactly it would be, which I guess is a sidebar. And I guess you expect the people to kind of next to the chat have the agenda section. Research, you interviewed 7 people about experience with meetings. Seems like you're answering your own pain point here, but summarizing it quite clearly at that. The pain points is a bit questionable here, because you're saying people heavily multitask between engaging in discussions and managing progress, ultimately compromising focus for both, and then interjecting conversations is never comfortable. Your, I guess, hypothesis is that in order to keep discussions on track and on time, someone will have to step in. For the sake of a productive meeting, people in meetings need to overcome the awkwardness of conversations to remind members of what meeting objectives are. What I missed in this case study, I guess, is the definition of who you want to target. Because what kind of brewed in my mind was like, okay, is this a solution or the problems you're answering for a meeting organizer or lead? Or is this for absolutely everyone? Or is it just for passive participants to be engaged? Or is it for both? But the most important part would be to actually start defining who and in what capacity would need this feature. Because the agenda would obviously have to come from someone, right? Is it from meeting organizer? Is the expectation for when meeting organizer is to still facilitate this? Is it just enabling them to do the facilitation better? Is that your hypothesis? Or is it for absolutely everyone and you try to do so many different problems, which would be very problematic? So something what I would unpick here, what I'm missing is the definition of whose problems are you actually targeting, and then framing it of what the solution would look like. Your design objective would be, how might we help members of the meeting stay focused on discussion topics and progress, which is a good, I guess, objective. And how might we? But again, need to cover exactly who. Members of a meeting is too broad and too abstract, and it could have a lot of permeations and differences, because different meetings in different companies as well are treated differently. A meeting the consultant would have with, let's say, some sort of outsourced employee or a client would also be very different, and they would use different tools and different perspectives. Therefore, you have to be cognizant of that and define clearly who you're going to target and who you're going to ignore, at least for the MVP or that immediate value release you want to make. As such, I would go back a step and try to define that. You basically created a storyboard and illustrated what happens before and what should happen after, where you're illustrating that, hey, you could have like a tool next to it which would remind you. But the specificity to me is still missing. For example, here you're saying Jordan brings up the agenda panel to start the discussions. So I presume Jordan is the owner of the meeting, right? Like that detail matters a lot, because then the responsibility is less about the tool, it's about still who's gonna guide it. And that's where my heart kind of is taking it into, because this is definitely a tool for someone who's organizing the meetings, not necessarily who's participating in the meeting. Or perhaps I'm totally wrong here. But you could also zoom out further before you jump into proof of concept and start wireframing your ideas, or like even take that storyboard. I would even zoom out even more. Check out my video on ideations, where I give you like a free bands or free buckets approach, where you start with the future. Like, what is that experience going to look like in the 10 years or so? What is that experience going to look in 5 years? What it would look like if it's fully automated? And then step back and define the medium term, which would be the ideal product experience. And then also ideate on that, let's say, proof of concept or MVP, like the immediate deliverables. So you have a progression towards the future stuff. I see that you kind of went for that mid-range, that kind of like quote unquote ideal product experience and just define it. But I would challenge you, think much bigger. Even if you don't capture it in a case study, it's going to make your solutions much more sound and future-proof, and you're going to consider of emerging tech. As a hiring manager, I could ask, like, have you considered any of the generative AI features, let's say? Or have you considered of AI features happening in Zoom already, where Zoom is transcribing things, actually suggesting the sentiment? There is a beta feature, and maybe by the time this is out, it's already out everywhere, but it captures the sentiment, the timing of speaking and so forth, and kind of labeling exactly who's participating most and who doesn't. Like, there's a lot of AI capabilities which Zoom is already considering. Have you considered how it's going to integrate into that? You know, thinking much bigger and more holistic. And then that would enhance your case study, because it's going to make it look like the real project instead of a self-directed project, if that makes sense. And the users found it extremely valuable. How? Like, how did you find that out? Like, what does that exactly entail? And why are you so sure? Because people could say to you, but they might not actually buy it or actually adopt it. That would be something to look out for as well. Like, how would you make sure? What would be your product strategy approach to adoption? That would be key to me as well. Even if it's just thinking, but if you can highlight it in the case study, it becomes even more, sound. Because considering like all the different stages of how you're gonna segment your users and how you're gonna engage with them and what sort of tools you're gonna employ on a bigger level than product design alone is super important for the success. And it's gonna make you look like a more strategic and much more senior designer. And then you created a high fidelity mockup based on the feedback, where you still have a time remaining indicator, topics, things of that nature, and then you tested the revised design. Right now, I'm framing this in my head as something you would do for Zoom perhaps, but even then, Zoom as a company would have some commercial goals. Like, why would they want to do this? Maybe you can frame it as an experiment at a minimum, or like as an R&D project to see exactly if it works or not. But still, every project has some sort of foundation, so something else to also reflect. So this is a really good example of a challenge and of a problem which needs solving, because there is a big impact in it. It's just that think holistically as well. Zoom out, because you can consider so many different angles to this and further improve on this project and kind of like make it even more commercially sound. If you do enjoy this video, do leave a comment down below. What do you think? Maybe you can give an advice to Joe as well. And on that note, I'll see you next time.